Welcome to All Things Food. I'm John Woods, and this is the channel where we not only love to cook, but we cook to love. Someone said, I like your channel because it's educational. I learn things every time I watch one of the videos. All your recipes are easy, they're economical. You can buy all this stuff at Walmart or your local grocery store, but most of all, I guarantee every one will be delicious. So today we're talking one of my all-time favorites, a comfort food. All of us love it. It's either called mashed potatoes, creamed potatoes, smashed potatoes, whatever you call that, as long as they're cooked properly, they're absolutely delicious. So by the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can cook this rather than this. A lot of people make mashed potatoes, but not everyone makes a really good mashed potato. And you might be saying, well, that kind of hits home today. I'm in that category because I've watched all the videos, I've read all the books, I've tried time and time again, but I can never really perfect mashed potatoes. I hope today, by the time we finish this video, you're going to be a potato cooking expert, because I've come up with 10 reasons that I think people make bad mashed potatoes. And I'm not only going to show you the problem, I'm going to show you the solution. I want you to hang with this video step by step, because you're going to learn something today. The first mistake we often make starts long before we ever get to the stove or come into the kitchen. It starts at the grocery store. What do I mean by that? You go to your local grocery store and you go into the produce section and you're looking for some potatoes to make mashed potatoes. Well, what do you find? 10, 15 varieties of potatoes. So instead of picking the proper potato, we either pick one for 2 or 3 different criteria. 1, it's economical, or 2, it's the prettiest potato that we see. And we base our selection of potato on the wrong criteria. When you go into the produce section of your supermarket, you're going to find 2 categories of potatoes. And I'm not going to get into a lengthy discussion about that in this video, but I'm going to share with you enough to really help you. We're going to break potatoes down into 2 categories. Waxy potatoes are the potatoes that you don't want. Those potatoes are low in starch, they're low in water, and they're high in sugar. They do not make a good mashed potato. And I'll try to drop a link in the description box below to show you, so you can study this a little bit more. The second potato is called a starchy potato or a common potato. And that is kind of like this russet potato that I have here, or an Idaho potato, which looks exactly like this. It was just certified grown in Idaho, or what's called a common potato. And this potato has all the qualities that you need to make really, really good mashed potatoes. Now, what are those qualities? 1, they're high in starch. 2, they're low in water content, and I'm going to show you in a minute why low in water content is important. And then they're low in sugar. Now, why do we want these to be low in water content? Well, whenever we cook these potatoes in whatever liquid, whether it's chicken broth or water that's been seasoned with a little salt, we want this potato to be able to absorb all the water, which is going to give us a much fluffier, creamier potato. All right, that leads us to the second mistake we make, and this is a real easy fix. But you've heard me say time and time again on many of my videos that consistency of cutting is consistency of cooking. And you really have to be consistent when you cut a potato for mashed potatoes. So what we're going to do, we've peeled the potato, we put it in water to keep it from oxidizing. That's very important. Just put it in cold water. You can even do this in the refrigerator overnight. Just put maybe plastic on top of it, but make certain that the potatoes are completely submerged so they don't turn black or brown. Get a good sharp chef's knife. We're going to secure that potato and we're going to cut right down through the middle of it, just like that. Now here's where we have a problem a lot of times. Some people will take this potato and they'll just start cutting it any old manner, and they'll get all these inconsistently sized pieces of potato. That's exactly what you don't want. I know what the thinking is. Well, we'll cut them small to make them cook better. That will mess up your mashed potatoes. So we're going to take this potato half and we're going to try to get it into consistent size pieces. We've cut it in half, and now we're going to cut it into 4 equal parts there, whatever works best, but we want them to be as equal and as proportionate as possible. Now, why do we want to do that? A very important reason. You want these potatoes to cook consistently. When they're in that hot water, if you have a tiny potato, versus a bigger potato, the tiny potato is going to cook much quicker, much faster than the big potato and absorb all that water, and it's going to give you an inferior mashed potato. So consistency of cutting is consistency of cooking. Learn how to cut consistent size potatoes or whatever vegetable you're cooking. We bought the right potato. We've evenly, consistently cut the potato. Now the third mistake we make, and this is probably one you haven't even thought about too much, we start the potatoes in hot boiling water rather than cool water. And why is that important? One, starting them in cool water allows for even cooking. It allows for the proper heat penetration from the outside of the potato to the inside of the potato. If you're cooking your potatoes, starting them out in boiling water or hot water, try this method. Start them out in cool or maybe room temperature water at best, and bring them up to a boil and cook them that way. I think you're going to find better heat penetration, better water absorption, and a much better potato. You don't want to boil your potatoes. Here's the reason why. When you boil the potatoes, they're going to cook too fast on the outside and not quick enough on the inside. So by the time you're finished with the potato, the outside is going to be beaten up, it's going to slough off, and it's going to be very mealy when you get done with it. Now you say, well, my mother always boiled the potatoes. Well, don't do it anymore, because it's the wrong thing to do when making really good mashed potatoes. Bring your water to a boil, then reduce it down a little bit to a simmer where it's just gentle bubbling around the edges of the pan. And you're going to find you're going to have a much better potato by not boiling your potatoes. Okay, the fifth reason that we have bad potatoes and not really great mashed potatoes is we don't properly season the potatoes. We season them afterward instead of during the cooking process. I want to tell you a little secret that will really, this one little secret will elevate your potatoes to a much higher level than you've ever cooked before if you're not doing this. When you put the potatoes in the water, in the lukewarm water or the cool water, get you some kosher salt or even table salt and season those potatoes. Don't be too generous with it, but get enough salt in there that the salt is going to absorb into the potatoes. Now you may cook your potatoes in chicken broth, or you may put bouillon in it, which is I'm going to do today. I'm going to put the seasoning in on the front end, so when I'm done, I'm not going to be too concerned with having to season them on the back end. I think you're really going to enjoy this little technique. All right, it's been pretty simple so far. We brought this to a boil, then we reduced it down to a simmer. I'm going to pull the potatoes out. We want them to be fork tender. I think they look perfectly fine, not overcooked. And that fork goes through with just very little tension, so they're exactly the way I want them. We want these potatoes to be fork tender. I'm going to take my fork or something sharp and just run down through them. There's a little bit of tension there. That's what I'm wanting. They're not falling apart. They're not sloughing. They're not going to be real mealy. These are absolutely perfect. Alrighty, we've drained our potatoes. Now, what is the next step? I wonder if you've ever thought of this. You need to make certain that you dry your potatoes. We don't want to make mashed potatoes with wet potatoes. So how are we going to do that? A couple ways you can do it. Some people will put it back in the pot that the potatoes were cooked in and turn it on low heat and move the potatoes around until the moisture's off of them. The method I like to use is to put my oven on about 300 degrees, put the potatoes on a sheet pan like I've done here, and I'm going to put those in the oven for about 15 minutes. So we're going to stick them right on in here. And we'll come back in about 15 minutes and we'll be ready to make some really great mashed potatoes. The point was brought up here in the studio, aren't I going to overcook the potatoes when I put them back in the oven? Not really, because I have it on a fairly low heat and they're not staying in there very long. It's about 15 minutes. I'm going to pull them out of the oven. Steam's coming off of them. They're nice and dry. And this leads me to the next point of mistakes that we make. One, we don't dry the potatoes. And the next point is we cool the potatoes down. So many times when we pull the potatoes out of the hot boiling water, I've seen so many people run cold water over their potatoes. What that's going to do is going to make your potatoes very, very mushy, and you don't want that. So we want these potatoes to be hot all the time for several reasons. One, we don't want them to get soggy. Two, when we go to mix them in just a minute, they mix much easier if they're warm rather than they're cold. All right, we're moving right along here. We've made our potatoes, they're ready to mash, and here's where we make another two big mistakes. And what are those? One, we use the wrong equipment. What do I mean by that? You want to use equipment that's gentle on the potatoes. Over behind me, I have a beautiful KitchenAid mixer. I love using it. It's a great piece of equipment. And the temptation is to put these potatoes in that mixer and to mix away. That would be the easy thing to do. But our tendency, whenever we use a mixer of any sort, we have a tendency to over mix the potatoes unless we're very careful. So there's a method I like to use. One, you can use the old-fashioned method that our grandmothers and mothers used to use, the old potato masher. This is perfectly fine unless you're doing, 30, 40 pounds of potatoes. You don't want to do that. And I've done it before, actually. But there's a couple other things that we can use that I like. One is a potato ricer, which I don't have here today. You simply put the potatoes in, squeeze it. They come out beautifully mashed. What I'm going to use today is the good old food meal, and this is really good for making potatoes. And I've learned using the food meal, don't overfill it because it doesn't work too well if you put too many potatoes in at one time. So we're going to put just a few of them in here. I'll show you how this little thing works. Right here, we'll just turn that handle, and look, man, that's almost like magic with mashed potatoes. See how beautiful those things look right there? And those are going to make the perfect mashed potatoes. I love a food meal. If you don't have one, I recommend getting one. They're not very expensive. So let me go ahead and mash up these potatoes, and then we're going to go to the next step. Point number 9, the 9th mistake we make is not heating our dairy before we put it into these warm potatoes. We put a lot of times we'll put cold dairy into these warm potatoes, and they're not going to absorb the butter and the cream like they should. So we want to make certain it doesn't have to be scalding hot. We just want to get it room temperature, enough to melt some of that butter there before we put these into the potatoes. Or just softened butter would be perfectly fine. Something like this would go in there just fine. You wouldn't have to worry about heating it up. So I'm going to go ahead and pour these in. We're going to mix away. And in a minute, we're going to have some scrumptious mashed potatoes. Now, a lot of times what I'll do, instead of using heavy cream or milk in it, I'll use nothing but butter. And those really make good potatoes, using nothing but butter as your dairy. There we have it, friends, these beautiful creamy mashed potatoes. They look absolutely great. I know they're going to be good. They're absolutely perfect potatoes. And the 10th point I want to tell you about of mistakes that we make when we're doing mashed potatoes, and I hope you learned something today. Like and subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. But mistake number 10 is this. You're going to become such an expert at potatoes. You're going to be so good at making potatoes. The problem is you're not going to make enough of them, and your family's going to demand that you make more. Now, let me tell you one more thing here. Remember what we talked about, instant mashed potatoes? If you get in a pinch and you don't know how to make these or don't have time to do it, watch this video above, because I'm going to show you how to take these potatoes and make them taste like these potatoes. Thank you for watching today. I'm John Woods with All Things Food. Not only remember this week as you go forth, not only love to cook, but cook to love, and I'll see you next time.